Finance meeting to order. I'm sure by the time we do the invocation, it'll be 3:30. Actually, just click now, so I think we're good. Senator Hickman, would you do us?
Let us pray. Lord God, thank you for this day, Lord, and thank you that you've given us a time, Heavenly Father, that we can represent and do the best for the great people of Georgia. Please give us wisdom, judgment, and moderation, Lord, as we enter this meeting. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Our distinguished chairman from House Ways and Means is here. If you want to come up and talk to us about House Bill 982. I know they passed out a version last week. Either one, wherever you're comfortable.
I think I usually do this. I fell out of that chair before.
Is that the one? Okay.
I think that's the one. I might have got a little.
So they had a sort of a cleanup bill. We've made a couple of changes to it as well, so we can go through and I guess both discuss them if you'd like to.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Bring before you House Bill 92, and I know you and I both worked pretty exhaustively last session to come up with some important tax relief for our homeowners and property owners, and this was a cleanup to that. It has a few pieces which I think remain relatively unchanged. There was a 5-acre limit put on that, the actual homestead itself. I know you reconciled that with CUVA language in this current.
Right, that was one of the changes we made. Is it means you don't double dip on it. You get one or the other. So that was our change.
Chairman, and then the surviving spouse would not have to refile for the homestead, being that there was a death there.
Yeah, because I think in the past they've had somebody that did die, and then they're even too late to do their April 1st. And so then you lose the whole thing and it starts over, correct? So that was a good change the House made.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then there's some changes to the notice. It would ask that for that estimated rollback. Then there's some dates in there. I know we're discussing some of that provision, but the estimated rollback would be provided, and if not, it would default back to the previous year's millage rate and calculation. And then if the property is under appeal, that they would still be allowed to file that homestead within that appeal process and during that appeal period.
Right, so it loosens a little bit the homestead if there's an appeal going on, other than limiting it to the April 1st date.
Correct. Yes, sir. And then if I'm reading the sub correctly, it would allow a recension of any opt-out by March 1st of any given year, and require an opt-out each year by March 1st for any local levying authority.
Correct.
And I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
And then one of the questions that has come up, and I know, I guess Senator Anavitarte, I guess your Paulding guy, is he head of the association this year, the tax assessors or something? Is that correct? Okay. I know he had sent some suggested language. I'm not sure we need to do it or not do it, but we've got the ACCG here. Dante, if you want to come up as well. And then, well, let me get a couple of questions on this before we get into that one. I don't know who was first here. I think maybe it was our majority leader, Gooch.
Yeah, so, thank you, Chairman. We talked about this morning, you and I did, and Senator Dolezal. I'm not sure the language properly captures what the intent of the sub is to do. So, the way I read this is every local government would be able to opt out anytime in the future on an annual basis. But I think the intent that we talked about was for the local governments opted out this year, they would have to come back yearly after the fact and opt out again year
Right.
after year. But it would not allow someone who didn't opt out this year to do that, or require them to do that, or allow them to do that in the future. So is this, how do you read this language?
Well, let me get with Ledge Council if you want to. Where you at over there? Why don't you just come over to the empty mic here?
So I'm looking at, is it line
at 10?
is it
Make sure
line
we're looking at
90?
this right. The intent is not to let anybody opt out in the future, but to give them the opportunity to opt back in. So I think what she's saying,
So the intent was to, for those locals that decided to opt out of this provision, we had a one-time opt-out. But if they exercise that one-time opt-out, then annually they would be required to take a vote to continue to opt out. But that would not allow any others to opt out in the future.
Yes, I believe the language in the draft in front of you should accomplish that
Okay.
intent. If you look on line 62, to opt out, government will have to adopt the resolution by March 1st, 2025. And then if you move down to lines 90 through 94,
Okay.
for that opt-out to remain effective after 2025, the governing authority has to again comply with all of the requirements for the initial opt-out.
Year after year.
Each
Gotcha.
year.
So line 64, or actually 62, is the trigger, correct? If they've opted out by March 1st
Yes.
of 25, then they will be required to opt out annually.
To remain opted out,
to-
yes,
Otherwise, they opt back in.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
okay? Vice Chairman Albers.
Yeah, I think the majority leader was hitting on my same point there. I understand what you're saying, thank you. This is helpful. I'm wondering, I realize we don't write the law necessarily to be text that people can always understand because there's a little bit of legalese, but I'm wondering if we describe that a little easier for those that might be needing to read it on the other side, just again, for the non-lawyers like me.
All right.
You're saying just clarify it.
Yeah,
You like the intent.
The intent is perfect, I think you should just clarify it.
All right, we'll go
I
on
read
to-
that correctly, did I not? Didn't I state it the way you meant for it to? Okay.
Yeah. All right, Dante, we had one section maybe to have a little discussion on. Senator Anabatarte's tax assessor had suggested some different language. I'm sort of neutral on that. I think if they don't have it, they're gonna use the previous year's digest, but, I don't know if you've looked at that and have an opinion on it.
So I believe the section you're referring to is section 6 of the bill, beginning on line 150 on page 7. And the existing language that's in the bill would require the local governments to certify their estimated rollback rate to both the tax commissioner and the tax assessors by March 31st of each year. And then that other proposed language that y'all could consider changing it to would be a requirement that that information be submitted to the tax commissioner and tax assessors no less than 15 days prior to the postmark of the annual notice of assessment. And the rationale behind that language is that some counties are operating on different cycles. Some of them are getting that notice out sooner than others. And so this just says that the information needs to get to the appropriate people within 2 weeks of them submitting that notice. This way they have time to submit it to the printers and keep the property tax cycle running on schedule.
All right. Any questions on that? Any opinions?
It just sounds like it's intended to do the same thing, so I
Okay.
wouldn't have any objection, certainly. If that
Well,
matters.
If we decide to do that, maybe, the senator from Paulding County there, since it's his tax assessor, could offer that amendment up if he so chooses to. Senator, Rhett, you had a question?
I pressed that because my mic.
Oh, I'm
doesn't
sorry,
work.
okay.
Chairman Blackman, or even Chairman Hostetler, I'm curious. I'm endeavoring this envisioning this annual opt-out, and I'm wondering. We used to have the notice of, estimated taxes. I'm wondering if we would want to include on the property tax assessment something along the lines of your municipality has opted out of the statewide floating homestead exemption. They will have the opportunity to opt out again this year. If they choose to opt out, your tax bill will be increased by Y amount of dollars, because we would know at that point, I think, what CPI is. We would know what we would have all the data to be able to run a calculation to inform the taxpayer what that means. I think if they absent that information, it's a little bit nebulous as to what the net dollar amount is to them. So I'm wondering if as this moves through the process, we might consider adding that notice to the process.
Okay. Well, of course, these are engrossed, and who knows, they might decide our bill's perfect over there, and you might not see it again, but we can certainly take another look at that.
I know Representative Gaines has some language that's not dissimilar from what was suggested there by the chairman, so maybe worth looking at if that's
Yeah.
amenable.
I don't want, a part of the negotiation was, we're trying to simplify it for those who don't opt out. So whatever we do, I don't want to punish them in this process by adding additional stuff that we kind of negotiated to do. Senator Albers?
One other question, getting back to, starting at lines 90, actually Senator Dolezal, I thought, had a brilliant idea of including not just the fact that they would have to hold the hearings, but they'd also have to have approval by their local delegation. Knowing that this passed overwhelmingly, both statewide as well as I believe in pretty much every corner of the state, it would get another set of checks and balances. What do you think about that, Chairman Shaw?
Can you're going to say that the local delegation would be required to do what?
They would have to agree. Yes,
Have to agree to the
legislative, yes.
They would have
So
to.
let's say in Cherokee County, as an example, if they decided they want to opt out, then the local legislative delegation would have to agree with them in order to let them opt out the next year.
I mean, I may be mistaken, but you might want to ask Ledge Council about that one. I think we explored some different opportunities there, and maybe that might have been brought with some question marks. But I mean, anything that would benefit the taxpayer, I think, is a good thing. And as long as that would be intended and that would ultimately benefit the taxpayer, then,
And you've always been a great champion there. We love working with you on that. And Chairman Dolezal brought this up, I think, last week. And as I thought about it more, sometimes people are laser focused into their one area, and us getting a statewide perspective to see how that passed across the state and through that area, having another check, and that check and balance, I think, has got a lot of merit to it. I don't know how we can make that happen necessarily, but I think it's worth discussion.
All right. Where'd you go? You want to weigh in on that?
Sure. Where's the back?
Here, come up to my mic.
Is it on?
It is.
Yes, I think we could add language to this draft that would require a local delegation to, after the procedures have been met by the local governments, to enact a local law to approve of the opting out. Yes, I think I could work on some language. We might need to think about it to make sure we get the timing right as far as when the opt-out will become effective.
We can also authorize you to draw up the appropriate language with the intent of it, I think, can't we?
Yes, you can.
Chairman, let's talk about that.
Okay. So now, we're now to, I believe, Senator Hickman.
I'm confused. There's a difference between what Senator Dolezal said and what Senator Albers said. Senator Dolezal said something along the lines of let the people know what the taxes would be without it, correct? On the notice? Yeah, as opposed to the local delegation saying, you're gonna do it like this.
I think we do both.
I don't know about that.
Couple questions on that.
Okay.
So, when we, I'm not sure this is on. When we talk about local
Oh, wait a minute.
delegation,
Yeah, it should be on.
let's throw a
Wait a
couple
minute.
of scenarios out. You said Cherokee County. Does that mean every legislator that has a part of Cherokee County, or if, let's say it's a school district that doesn't include everybody in that county delegation, is it only the delegation that's impacted by that jurisdiction? You have cities that spread out over multiple counties as well, so we need to think about this. And is it a 50% plus one majority, or is it unanimous of that delegation? So, I mean, it may be a little early, but we need to know the details of this.
I think we would follow the way we do any other piece of local legislation, right? It's a majority of anyone who covers that specific municipality or area. So that would be consistent with any other bill that we'd take through state and local government operations.
And when you say approve, does that have to happen in a public meeting? Does it have to happen with notice of a public meeting in a jurisdiction, or can it be done here at the Capitol? Have you thought through any of those?
Well, if we do the typical local legislative process, it would follow the same way of dropping a local bill, and it would have to be advertised, and it would have to then get the appropriate signatures to move through the local consent calendar.
But
and
it could
approve.
be any time during the year, not just when we're in session.
I think you can't pass bills on a local consent calendar unless we're in legislative session.
So some of these, all cities and counties doing this during
Well,
session?
let me ask a question on those lines then, because right now we can put it on the ballot, but you're saying not even go to the ballot, just have a local group do it. Is that what?
Just add another check and balance in there. If they can opt out,
I'm not opposed to it, I'm just trying to think through the logistics of it, because if it's as simple as having 7 House and Senate members getting together and saying, we agree or disagree, and then you sign an affidavit or a certificate, then it's done. But, I mean, I don't want us to get into setting millage rates for cities and counties either, you know? So we gotta be careful not to go too far on that, so I'm just thinking out loud, so how far does this go?
Mr. Chairman,
And
is that,
how easy will it be to implement it?
All right, sure.
is it some sort of a redundant check and balance? I mean, don't the local delegation already has the authority to put somebody back into a
We can
base
we
your
can
homestead
put it
exemption?
in. We can put it in local legislation right now. Yeah.
I just, it might be quite cumbersome if there, I mean, there's already an opportunity to do that. We're adding an additional opportunity. Is that what you're
so you're
suggesting?
saying in that case, we could just drop the local bill and take them back to the original?
Yes,
anyway.
sir.
We could in fact opt them out on our own.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah,
That's fine.
and there's local legislation been drafted already this year in some jurisdictions to do that, so,
Who would have done that?
I don't know.
Smart people.
Taxpayer change.
Senator Estevez, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo the leaders, maybe not concern, but just curiosity around what the process would be. And I would caution us against substituting our judgment in these budgetary considerations that would have significant impacts at the local level. Substituting our judgment when we are a step or two removed from what those local officials have to deal with would be a problem, especially because we do not feel the same kind of pressure that they do. I can tell you the feelings that I felt and the heat that I got from constituents on the school board is very different than the heat that I get in this building. It's much easier here. So I think empowering constituents and taxpayers with information makes a lot of sense. But it will be very easy for us to vote one way or the other here, and much harder. Those local officials have to have a lot to consider, and for us to substitute our judgment for theirs, especially when it comes to the millage rate, I think would set a dangerous precedent.
I understand your concerns. I guess, from my perspective as a county commissioner that implemented a total freeze in 2002, and it's still there 23 years later, and the millage rate has been stable. The digest increases every year. The bills get paid, that kind of thing. All this does here is limit it to the rate of inflation just for homeowners. And I've had districts that have increased on the homeowners over the last 5 years, 80%, 84%, 98% increase over 5 years, taking that increased assessment and not making adjustments, and have just, the backdoor method. So, and this doesn't even take away from that. They still keep all that big inflation. It's just that in the future, just for the homeowners, they have to limit it to the rate of inflation. I think this is a pretty mild measure. And I know you're saying our judgment's different than theirs, but I would say, number one, I did it on a more stringent method of no increase. And number two, when taxpayers in Georgia are getting a 98% increase in their taxes in a 5-year period. They're crying out for some relief. And so, I don't think we caused this problem, but I think we've got an obligation to fix it. Senator Anaportate?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do echo what you're saying. I do understand what my colleague from Atlanta is saying. I think this debate is very similar to one of our former colleagues from DeKalb County, Fran Miller, when he would talk about property tax relief and assessments when DeKalb County, to pay for stormwater and everything else under the sun. I think at that time they did a 5-year freeze on taxes, locally, and I know it was hotly debated. But I think my concern is that in this instance, when I don't think we're questioning the expertise, but I think when we have, for example, in my home county, 63% of the people have spoken, and on top of that, increased millage rates, 7 failing schools, and then just coming out of the pandemic, the number of millions of dollars we've seen school districts even accept in terms of ESSER money, one-time funding. I think it comes down, and I'm just, I'm not saying this as, my friend from Atlanta, Senator, the rest of us haven't been on the school board. There is a fiduciary responsibility, I think, of that school board and that superintendent to make the correct business decisions for the future. And if there was a lot of, money coming in from the taxpayer with no relief on top of money coming from the feds, I think at some rate, with inflation and with everything, increased assessments, there needs to be relief, I think, for the taxpayer. Because at the same time, one of the things I'm hearing is for school districts that did not give a teacher pay raise to their teachers, like this General Assembly and Governor Kemp did, those same teachers are paying taxes at this increased value. So not only are we not giving them a local pay increase, but we're charging them out of their homes on top of the goods and services and daycare and everything else. So I think something has to give. But I think this fallacy that just because the General Assembly put in an opt-out clause that we get to use it, I think is wrong. And I think we need to listen to the citizens who voted the way they did. At the end of the day, I think just like in life, somebody gives you a tool, it doesn't mean you go use it because it's sitting there and it's, what you think is best. I think it's what the citizens want.
All right. I think I'm hearing that the language in here, while not clear, the intent is good, and maybe we can look at that if you make some changes, if there's a way to clear that up. But the intent, as far as the legislature getting involved, I think I'm hearing that we want to continue the process of where we can drop local legislation if we want to. And then, I don't know if there's any other questions. The only other one, I guess, would be this potential amendment. Is the ACCG, and I'll ask you, the chairman, too, are y'all neutral on this language, or?
It seems like a friendly amendment, Mr. Chairman. I had one other point,
Sure.
if I may, is I didn't know if with the kind of the re-opt out each year, if you have a base year homestead exemption otherwise, would you still be required to file that opt out on an annual basis?
It would, my understanding, only if you have opted out, would you? What are you asking?
If you already have a freeze or some other local exemption in place, would you?
See, my understanding was if you had something as good or better, you didn't even have to opt out. I know some people have opted out when there was no purpose to opt out. Am I wrong on that, Dante? Or?
So each local government, whether they have an existing float or freeze, still needs to make a decision whether to stay in or opt out of the House Bill 581 floating homestead exemption.
Well, that's different than I think what we were told last year was that if they didn't have any reason to opt out, they didn't need to make you don't have to, if you're opting in, you don't have to do anything. If you're,
Right.
If you're not opting out and yours is better, then it's gonna default to the better one. So again, I don't know why you have to do anything on it. Is that different now?
So what you're saying is correct, that there are some circumstances that could be unique, such as if you had a local freeze, like you implemented in Floyd County, and that freeze doesn't apply to special service districts, the House Bill 581 floating homestead exemption applies to all millage levies except for bond levies. So it would apply to special service districts, whereas some of the local floats or freezes may not. But it all depends on the exact wording in those local floats or freezes.
So back to Chairman Blackman, what are you recommending here? Are you-
Nothing per se, just, just making that observation that
Okay.
and that question, so.
Yeah, anybody that, I think it's 73 jurisdictions, cities, counties, and schools that have something in place already. 73. And the world hasn't ended in any of those places. I think they've all done okay, unlike some of the stories we hear out there. But those, it's not, certainly not my intent, and I don't think anybody's intent that they have to go through this process. If we need to clean that language up, we can do that. Senator Albers.
I think this is important. Back in 2019, we changed it for Fulton County schools and all the North Fulton cities, that we reset their value back to the lowest rate it was in 2016, 17, and 18. So we reset them, and then it could never go up more than 3% or the CPI, whichever was lower. So in this case, we'd want to stay where they're at. So if they don't have to automatically opt out, we want to be really sure we don't, in the effort to help somebody, hurt somebody, because it's been meaningful. And by the way, Senator Beach and my schools and cities have thrived in that time. There have been nobody without.
Well, we can look at that going forward as you, unless you, if you think you guys are gonna change anything, or if you don't, then we'll look at it.
I think, Chairman, that's something that would probably be amended later if need be, since it doesn't really apply to this current year so much as it would be moving forward.
Okay, so you've got
If
plenty of
that's
bills
fair.
over there in House Ways and Means. I think at 10 bills per page, I had a stack about this thick that your committee members have given you over there. Have you got a total count on it so
There've been an
far?
awful lot dropped. It's triple digits and then some, yes, sir,
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman.
100 and something bills in that committee over there. The 10 bill for limit, everybody's using their 10, it sounds like.
Yeah,
over there.
really.
All right,
it's
well, I
really
think
cut
that's a
back.
good suggestion that we can tweak it down the line if we need to. There's no urgency on that.
But this is a friendly amendment, I would think.
Okay. Well, if we've got, I don't know that everybody has it, though, so we'll read it out. If you want to read it out, let me put your mic on there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just, Chairman, I think you had it drafted, so I just want to make sure this does line up with what's in the bill, but I'll read it out loud and we'll fact check it, make sure it's right. So the amendment I'm reading, the LC number on the top of this is 50125S. Would replace lines 130 through 140 and state the current year's estimated rollback rate for each levying or recommending authority that certified its estimated general maintenance and operation rollback rate for the current year to the County Board of Tax Assessors and County Tax Commissioners specified under Code Section 48-5-306.2, or for each levying or recommending authority that did not certify its estimated general maintenance and operations rollback rate to the County Board of Tax Assessors and County Tax Commissioner by the date specified in Code Section 48-5-306.2, the previous year's millage rate levied by the authority. That's the first part.
I've got her looking at it to match it up because the line numbers have changed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
that's
what I-
that's
okay,
that's
that's
a
what I
good
thought.
point. Okay. All right. Well, we'll work on that for a minute, and
You want me to read the second part and then we don't have to.
sure.
And then the second part of the amendment would basically be replacing, as of now, 143 through 154. I know that's going to change. Below with the following: each levying and recommending authority in accordance with the procedures specified under Code Section 48-5-32.1 shall annually calculate its estimated general maintenance and operations rollback rate for the current year and shall certify such rate to the County Board of Tax Assessors and County Tax Commissioner no less than 15 days prior to the postmark of the annual notice of assessment.
So I guess on here, that's gonna start with, 152. Let me get that back now. Well, when this was sent in yesterday from the head of the tax assessors, the bill has changed slightly. So, that lines 143 to 154 would now be, 152 to 163.
This is what. We have the same thing. Yeah, 'cause it's off the original.
There is a permissive piece that is struck that I think was probably not I don't know if that was intentionally struck or if that was where it may actually estimate the taxes to be paid.
Yeah, well, I guess it's permissive. We had taken the estimated off because it was always wrong. That was the only thought on that was.
Correct. It was permissive. I mean, just essentially with some of the counties, the assessors, they thought that the people may want some sort of calculation there, but obviously.
Okay. So I'm thinking this would be lines 142 to 149 now.
Yes.
And am I correct down here?
This one is 153 to 163, yes.
53, okay. All right, I'll give that back to you. And, let's see, was that? Yeah. Yeah, replacing lines 142 to 149, and then 153 to 163. The same thing you read, is that, 1, 2, 3, 4, is that, who's the light up there? Is that Senator Rhett? That Dolan, okay.
I'll be his proxy. Can I bring up a point relative to lines 93, 94, Mr. Chairman?
All right.
It kind of seems like we're discussing everything here. I do wonder if we can write into this a provision that if the governing body has already adopted, certainly I think a complete freeze like you adopted, we should not be requiring them to have 3 public hearings and re-vote every year. I think
Right,
it's
I think we could probably authorize her to drop language to make that clear. That would be,
it would essentially we're only
A second
requiring
amendment.
if you have previously opted out. That's the trigger that we're looking for, right? Is a previous opt out, then
Just trying to clarify it though.
yeah, so would that, let me ask out of Ledge Council, if we said there for those who had previously opted out, would that narrow it down enough? We're on line 90. It says to remain effective, so I think that's the intent of it. But well, your point too is those that have a freeze in place. For those who didn't opt out, or for those who have a freeze equal or better.
no, I think that the previous opt out would be the trigger. So if that may suffice to do what we want. Is that
Because they're already, okay, right?
Well, but there's some people
Oh, I see what
that opted out that shouldn't have opted out because they have a better system in place.
and then they lost the opportunity for floss if they opted out.
Not if they have a base year
If they have
exemption in
if they have a
place.
if they have a better thing, they're still okay with it, but,
But you're saying some people made a mistake and did it by accident, right?
well, I think in some cases, they might have been close, but not better.
But those people could opt in under this.
They can opt in,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
we may be okay then.
all right. We'll continue looking at it on the process,
Mr. Chairman, I do have one more question.
okay?
Because this, I didn't love this when we did it last year. And the same reason, relative to removing the estimated tax bill. And it was stated then and again now that that was always wrong. It would seem to me the only scenario in which it would be wrong is if the municipality was going to do a rollback and the tax bill is being based off of last year's millage rate. What's the other scenario in which the estimated tax bill will be wrong if you're working off of existing millage
Well, the
rates?
people that are putting the notice out aren't the ones that are levying the tax, and they don't always consider all the exemptions. I don't know, you wanna speak to that?
Sure. So, in the standard way of doing it, you're using the current year's value, last year's millage rate, and so assuming that there's even a partial rollback, that number is always going to be high. In most instances, it also doesn't factor in exemptions or credits such as the homeowner tax relief grant that the General Assembly and Governor passed a couple years back.
The one-time grant?
Yes.
Why would it
and-
include that now?
I'm just giving you an example for when it was off. So that year, all of those were about $500 high, not counting any rollback or partial rollback.
Sure, that's a once-in-a-history event that's happened. But absent a rollback, it is accurate, correct?
I still think you have some trouble sometimes with exemptions, but
Okay.
more
I
often than
think
not,
that
it's
was,
been inaccurate.
frankly, I think that was put in there because the locals didn't want to get phone calls about the rising property taxes. Mine was always correct. I'm sure there's instances where it was not, but it is pretty simple math. I mean, you're taking fair market value times 40% times millage rates, or I should say minus exemptions times millage rates. That's not difficult math. And it's the assessor that's sending these out as well, correct?
Yes.
So the same assessor who's going to send me my tax bill. So I don't understand why we keep saying
Well, the
that.
tax commissioner sends the tax bill, doesn't he?
Correct.
So it's assessors
With,
versus
yeah,
tax
with the
commissioner.
data though from the assessors. I just think that we removed a piece of transparency from that process last year. And if it needed to be fixed, I'd much rather see it fixed than removed.
Okay, Senator Albers.
One of the challenges we have too is you get your tax bill in the mail and it shows you the numbers that Senator Dolezal said, but it doesn't show you the math necessary for your floating homestead exemption. So what you have is you have your figure for what you owe in your taxes. But unless you pull out your last several years' taxes, because we have this problem where I am, you don't understand because you see your house value skyrocketed. And you thought, oh my gosh, what the heck happened? It just went up $300,000. But because nobody actually looks back at the last year's bill to see how it can only go up 3% is part of the problem. So the tax bill in itself is erroneous and it really tells the wrong,
I mean, the notice.
the notice.
Yes.
Yeah, so even when you get it, it's hard for anybody to truly understand what it is. Perhaps if we're gonna update this, we gotta do this right and put on, hey, you have a floating homestead exemption, maybe this was your last year or the years before's amount, so people understand what they're paying, because most people just don't realize they pay the bill and the next year they get a notice in the mail and they get paranoid.
Well, yeah.
We may need to, like the chairman said, we got probably something else coming. I don't wanna take up the whole committee today on this, so we might need to look at that in a future bill or
I know
something.
that one thing, and I'm not saying that this, necessarily is contrary to what, Chairman Dolezal spoke to, but one of some of the testimony we received is that there are taxpayers that are writing a check when they get their notice, and it's much higher than it otherwise would be. Is that, I believe you can probably speak to that
that's
as
accurate.
well.
Even though it says in clear letters, this is not a bill, there were taxpayers who were getting confused when they received their annual notice of assessment and they were writing a check in response to that. And a check in that instance cannot be cash because there's no bill, and there's actually a penalty where the local governments pay back double if they cash that.
All right, well, that part may need to continue to be looked at, but I mean, it certainly will the committee too. Well, anything else we need to talk about here? I think we've talked about a number of issues, so I guess first we need to see is there a motion to approve the bill and then look at amendments. All right,
I move we do pass House Bill 92, LC number 501162S.
all right, we've got a motion, a second. Now the floor is open for amendments. Senator Anavatarte, does he need to read the whole thing out again, or?
I'm okay.
Okay.
I didn't hear him the first time.
All right, well, we'll read it one more time then.
Just kidding.
Yeah, okay.
So,
I was gonna
Get a
call your
lot of
bluff on
no's
it, you know.
after they said that.
so Mr. Chairman, I'll just for the record, the amendment as read before, and I'll submit this for the record. Well, y'all have it for the record. We're replacing lines 142 through 149 in the first portion, and replacing lines 153 through 163 with the second portion of what I stated earlier.
All right, so we've got a friendly amendment. Is there a second to that? Second by Senator Hickman. Any other discussion? All right, first on the amendment, all in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. Okay, opposed? One opposed, okay. All right, and then, so the amendment passes with one no vote. The underlying bill, House Bill 92, all in favor, raise your hand. All right, and I think that's unanimous. Any opposed? I didn't see any. All right, motion carries. You can go back to your 100-something bills and Ways and Means and have fun with it.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman.
and you-
We'll send as many of those your way as we can. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank y'all. All right, we'll go back to Senator Rhett. You've got a bill if you want to step down there and present it. We've got a couple of these, so we're going to hear this one, hear another one.
Aren't these House bills having income taxes as revenue as they come?
Yeah.
State revenue versus local.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, fellow senators, colleagues, and the rest of y'all.
Tell us your LC number you're working from. Make
I'm
sure
working with LC 460957, Senate Bill 26.
I got to go back and find it here.
Yes, Senate Bill 26, LC 460957.
Well, for some reason, I think I lost my copy of it, so. All right, I've been given a copy of it. I did look it over earlier, but for some reason, it's not in my folder. I may have taken it out.
You can look in my folder I left.
No,
over
it's
there.
good. I've got it now. All right, go ahead.
Okay, sir. This bill requires the State Revenue Commissioner to establish rules regulating and applying the cost of living adjustments to determine the maximum allowable amount of retirement pay received from the military retirement benefits to be excluded from the Georgia taxable income. This bill requires the State Revenue Commissioner to establish the rules that use the appropriate cost of living index reflecting the effects of inflation and deflation on persons receiving military service retirement income. The Commissioner may use any consumer price index he or she feels relevant as reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics of the United States Department of Labor or any other such federal index if the Commissioner determines such federal index reflects the effects of inflation and deflation. Any such cost of living adjustment deemed appropriate by the Commissioner must result in a proportional adjustment to the amount of military retirement income excluded from the Georgia taxable income. Basically, periodically you're going to increase for the veterans the cost of living over time. So why not let the tax commission establish the rules and tie it to an applicable consumer index which reflects inflation per his or her discretion. Today I have Drew here. Drew, what's your last name again?
Keenan.
And he's with the the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and he's going to talk to you a little bit.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members
ahead.
of the committee. My name is Drew Keenan. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of the Veterans Coalition Foundation, and I'm the Director of Employment Development for the Veterans of Foreign Wars for the state of Georgia. In that capacity, I'm consistently talking to corporations that are in the state of Georgia, doing business in the state of Georgia, and corporations that may be intending to do business here in the state of Georgia. It might interest the committee to know that Georgia is now listed in the top 10 worst states for a retiring vet to settle in. That might surprise the committee. That might surprise you, Mr. Chairman. The contemporary warfighter is much more sophisticated than we were. I got out of the military in 1975, okay, and my ceremony was, here's your DD-214, that's the front gate, see you later. Now they go through seminars, they go through separations seminars, they go through classes. Anywhere they want to live is a couple of keystrokes away on a computer, and they can learn anything that they want. And they find out that Georgia can't compete with its surrounding states because a lot of the surrounding states do not tax military retirement pay at all. Georgia only exempts the first 17,000, with some exceptions that might bump it up just a little bit. But what is conspicuous by its absence is a COLA in that legislation. So year over year, especially in the last couple of years with hyperinflation, that 17,000 has whittled away to something less, depending on whose numbers you want to listen to, anywhere between 12 and 15%. Without a cost of living adjustment year to year, that diminishes more and more and more.
And we're just talking about taxpayers 62 or under in this, correct?
Sir?
Taxpayers 62 and under.
No, we're talking about military
the
retirees.
75.
We're talking about military retirees, military retirement pay.
Uh-huh.
This bill is specific to military
Yeah, I'm
retirement
saying
pay,
it backwards, but yeah.
not the general population. This is veterans, post 9/11 mostly, veterans, and some Vietnam vets. There's a couple of us still around.
No,
Okay.
I don't think I'm saying it backwards, am I? Taxpayers under 62 get this exemption. Mhm.
Oh, I thought you said all taxpayers under 62.
No,
I didn't.
I'm talking about this, we're talking about the 17.5 is military retirees under 62.
Right. So if you look at post 9/11 warfighters that went in, they're between the ages, the ones that are retiring now, between the ages of 39 and 45 years old. All right, this is the retiree from the military now. All right. Okay. All right. So what we're looking for, essentially, it's quite simple, is some kind of cost of.
I'm losing a quorum in 10 minutes.
Okay, yeah, cost of living adjustment in that tax, in that tax law to allow Georgia to compete with the surrounding states for, the workforce.
All right.
Maintain veterans.
All right, we've got a fiscal note in here. I think it's fairly small. So this would put a cost of living on that amount of money, basically, is what we're after. Okay.
Right.
All right, we're going to hear one more bill real quick here, unless there's any questions anybody has on this one. I think we understand it. You got a question?
If I can just make a statement, please. 17.5 is correct, but if a veteran also receives a earned income of $17,500 more than that, it actually becomes $35,000. So, but I support you.
Right.
Support it. So there's
Right.
a little bit of a
You're
little bit different
correct.
quirk in it, and I think we also need to look. If we're looking at this going forward, we also need to look at the all retirement income exclusion for all the gray hairs in this room. It's 65,000 and it hadn't been updated since 2012.
Okay, one more quick question, then we need to move on.
I agree at a level we're going here. I wonder though if we separate out those who were in combat versus those who aren't. I'm not against the person who may have been a cook or logistics officer, in San Diego enjoying the beach versus the person who was literally out there in the front lines putting their life at risk. I almost see those two different categories. I think we should reward those who are more in the front lines and not, just something for us to consider.
Just
All
to
right.
basically, the bill just helps keep up the cost of living and tie it under the discretion of the Revenue Commissioner.
Okay.
And they tie it
Yeah,
to
I don't think the
consumer
current law
tax.
distinguishes between combat and non-combat veterans.
All right, well, we're gonna move on to this other bill. We're
Okay.
gonna hear that one as well. If, we appreciate you being here. I'm sorry for the time thing, but I've got
No, that's
people
fine. I
that have a
appreciate your
committee.
time.
They're gonna leave me, and I don't have the votes on anything at that point.
Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your time.
Judiciary. Judiciary. All right, give us your LC number. I've got your
Mr.
bill in
Chairman,
my
I'm
folder.
working Senate Bill 31, working off of LC 501003.
Wait a minute, let me get the chatter down in here, so we can hear you. Senator Orrick, you ready to listen here? All right, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, this is a similar spirit of the last bill. The author mentioned this. If you look at this map, it really crystallizes, I think, a little bit even more as to the outlier that Georgia is regionally and even nationally. I wouldn't say outlier, but we're in the minority in terms of the way that we tax military retirement pay. This bill would eliminate all state income tax on military retirement pay, would bring us in line with all of our southeastern neighbors, and even a lot of our Midwestern friends as well. So fiscal note on this one obviously is larger than the fiscal note on the last bill because that was using a little bit more of a narrow scope to accomplish a similar goal. And I was not aware of all of the groups that would come in support of this in this letter. I got to tell you, Mr. Chairman, this is the first time I've had a bill supported by so many chambers of commerces. The Farm Bureau, food industry. These people are usually fighting my bills, Mr. Chairman, but here they are in support. So
Makes you question your bill, huh?
yeah, indeed, indeed. Man, but happy to answer any questions. But I think it's pretty simple what this does. You can see the cost on the fiscal note, and would like to have Georgia join the 38 other states who currently do not tax military retirement income.
So 38 states don't tax military retirement income. Your bill would do that, and I think everybody sees the fiscal note there. It's
The
there's a-
median would be about 40 million. That ranges basically between 22 or 23 on the low side, and then 58 to 68 on the high side. And Chairman, I would only add to that if I'm a retired veteran, I'm looking at where I want to move. I think that these veterans personify the exact types of citizens we want to both attract and retain in the state. They are civic-minded and add a richness to the communities they ultimately locate to, and I would hate to see our income tax be a deterrent to them coming here.
So Senator Reddy's going a little bit further than you, it looks like, on his bill.
Senator
here.
Redd was actually a co-sponsor of this bill as well, though.
All right, thank you. All right, Senator Ambitarte.
Yeah, the only comment I'll make to Senator Dozal's point, this is probably one of the best bills we'll take up during the session. I mean, I know I've had even my father-in-law leave Georgia for Tennessee literally over just this issue. And the number of military families or, whatnot that have left Georgia literally for Tennessee, even more than Florida or the other states, has been tremendous. So this will, I think, finally shut that issue down and, support our veterans, keep them here in the state to spend their hard-earned money, and at the appropriate time, I'll make a motion to move this bill out of committee.
Any other questions from anybody, or just,
I just want to make, number two, to make a comment. I want to echo what our caucus chair said. Great bill. I think this is the right thing to do. I just wanted to ask you, Chairman Dozal, you also want to eliminate the income tax for all citizens of Georgia down the road.
I would love to do that.
That's a goal of yours, of mine.
all right, we're back to Senator Ambitarte, if you want to make a motion.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion. We go ahead and pass out Senate Bill 31. 31's a great number. LC 50, 1003.
All right, we've got a motion, is there a second? Second by Senator Hickman. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. All right, motion carries unanimously. We kept it under an hour, and Judiciary can get their members there for a really fun meeting. Meeting adjourned.